Hello and welcome to my Runic Striker deck profile. Today I've got a real nice deck for you in case you ever decided you just hate your opponents. People do not like playing into this deck, but it's actually very good and able to play into decks you wouldn't think it'd be able to. So to start, we'll have 3 Runic Tip. I may or may not only have 1 copy of it at the moment. This card is obviously great as the searcher and a starter, and it's usable in turn 1, so it's probably the second best card in the deck behind only Runic Fountain. We played it 2 because, you can't play it at 3. I don't know if you would play it at 3, but we also have Terraforming to get there. It's also a spell, which is important for the Striker portion of this deck, and then since it's a normal spell, it's also searchable off of Thrust in case your opponent decides they would like to interact with you when they've got a monster on board. Next, we have 3 of each of the good ones, the ones that actually do something for you when your opponent has a board. Of course, you want to max out on these. Not only are they Runic cards that can summon, they are Runic cards that interact with your opponent's board and makes it playable for you. Destruction in particular is very important because it helps you out the lose condition for the deck, that of course being anti-spell. Anti-spell is very, very difficult for the deck, but we have a few ways to deal with that, so long as you're able to get rid of it one way or another, you'll be in a very good spot. And then of course we have 3 Slumber, because that's activatable on turn 1, and then 1 Droplet as well for the turn 1. And then these 2 are just different names. The Dispelling and Smiting Storm are just names that occasionally you get off, and when you get a big Smiting Storm, that's very important for this deck since our goal is deck out. But since they're different names, it also means you're able to activate them on a turn, which comes up a little more often than you'd have to hope. But yeah, that also puts the count of Runic spells to 18, which gives you a good chance to see them with the Fountain. Obviously, with Fountain and Terra, that'd be 21, but it's 18 quick play spells, which is a good number because you need a high number to make sure you can always resolve Fountain. And also it helps for other RNG aspects of this particular list. With the Runic portion of this deck out of the way, we now get on to the fun part, the part that people probably want more than anything else, and that's the Striker portion, of course. So we've got 2 of the best cards in the entire game, Sky Striker, Mobilize, and Engage. The card is insane, just because of its advantage purposes and the fact that you can keep recycling it. I can't tell you how many times through testing I've been able to resolve like 3 or 4 Engage on one turn, and it feels very, very good when you go +8. Next, we have a bit of utility for playing into boards, and that's a Widow Anchor. Again, I only have 2, don't mind the blank card in the back. This is useful, more or less actually to take the body they're attacking with, not even for the negation effect, because our goal isn't to really halter their board, it's to live 3, 4, 5 turns total while we're milling them out, and this is a Snatch Steal is very useful. Then we have one Shark Cannon for a very similar purpose as this, though this does have different applications into different decks depending on what you're playing, what the format is. But being able to steal a body and not give it back is both a blessing and a curse. Especially if it's like Dragoon, then it's crazy. We'll have a very funny looking Afterburners. It's just a different Striker name. It's also board removal and back row hate, so it's good to have Afterburners in if you're able to play it. And we've got 1 Hornet Drones because that's a body. It's a spell body as well. 2 Linkage because that's a body, a spell body as well. As you may know, with Sky Striker, there's a big need for spells, and so having as many spell bodies as possible is pretty good. It also clears the extra monster zone off of the Hugin that you have there so that you can play Striker if that's where you're at. Next, we have the Multi-Roll. Multi-Roll is crazy because it gets you your resources back, which this deck is entirely about out-resourcing your opponent, getting 3 or 4 monster negates for their turns so that they cannot play past you. And then finally, the 2 most important pieces, well, realistically 1, but 1 very important tech piece, that would be the girls. 1 Ray, 1 Rose. Initially through testing, we only had 1 Ray in the list, but due to the fact that we have a lot of removal in this list, and we don't rely on the Striker engine to be what's making it go, putting a Rose in made a lot of sense, especially with the Flashing Fire. It lets you get 2 for 1 very often. That just sounds very, very valuable. So this is a piece we're going to be testing with in the future, and it also has applications as a tech piece due to another bit of the flex spots. And so putting this in graveyard when you can is really neat and very good. And finally, we'll have the flex non-engine spots. There are 7 spots left to make 40. And so a few of these are going to be proxies. I'm sorry, but it's what I've got. I'll try and edit over them in the video, but we'll see what happens. To start, 2 Thrust, because that card is crazy. Engage is a normal spell. Very funny. We have Terraforming. And then we also have Foolish, not not Rhoda. We have Foolish of Burial. This lets us dump specific cards in case, because we run a few discards for specifically the Runic engine, but if you happen to see the discard already, it lets you put Ray Engrave, it lets you put Rose Engrave if that's what you need. But speaking of the targets for it, one Keldo and another proxy, one Kelbeck. So with this list, if you're able to resolve a Foolish Burial Kelbeck Mill 5 turn 1, that lets you go, I believe, +3. So you'll draw 3 off a fountain if you mill even 1 without having to discard for the Runic Hugin to search the field spell. This lets you plus very, very hard, and if you're able to Foolish something like the Engage specifically, and then you have any way into Kagari, that lets you engage, search, and draw on turn 1 without needing the new link that'll come out in who knows how long. That lets you Foolish as well on turn 1. But as of right now, this is the best way we can do it. It really lets your graveyard get loaded up. And then Keldo has utility is in this deck, as it can recycle your Widowmakers for you so that you don't lose them to the multi-roll too early. Or alternatively, it lets you put the field spell or anything really that you want back into the deck. And that's assuming you don't want to shuffle your opponent's graveyard, as this is also just interaction. And finally, we have 2 more thrust targets. This can be any combination of cards. So these are the 2 that I will be playing. You could also play Lightning Storm. Dark Hole is really good because, we're playing Sky Striker. It's kind of important to have your main monster zones clear very, very often. And then Lightning Storm is just another way to try and clear the board. But it's not a card I currently have in because we're playing continuous spells and field spells. So we end up having cards face up very often. So it doesn't really help us there. And finally, Talents is absolutely insane. It always has been in this format, or any format, really. And so it lets us, have 3 banned cards in one because they decided to activate a monster effect while they had a monster on board. Finally, we'll get on to the extra deck, which is split into 2, possibly 3 bits, no matter, depending on how you look at it. So to start, we'll have 3 of the best card in this deck, not named Hugin, in the extra deck anyways. That is Kagari. We are playing 3 Kagari because we want to recycle Engage as much as possible, really out-resource our opponents, because at some point we will, so long as you're able to loop the Engage, because they can ash it once, we'll get it back, and we're still going +2 while they go -1. It's really crazy. I guess it's +1 while they go -1, but it's very, very good. We have Azalea because she's actually kind of crazy. So she says Anti-Spell is not a problem. If they go Anti-Spell, we can make Azalea and pop it on summon, and then we even clear the EMZ so that we can play the Runic cards, which is really funny. To summon, of course. And then it's also important because this is a level or link 2 monster, which is something we're pretty much maxing out on without really committing too hard to it, so that when we put, say, a Hugin on board and we have a way to summon a Ray, we can then make any of the link 2s to clear the board, or specifically so that we can make a Kagari add back Engage, activate then. Next, of course, because of that, we've got 2 Zeke. This will probably become 1 Zeke once the new Camellia comes out. Again, I don't know when it comes out, but that card is absolutely ridiculous, and will make this deck even better, more consistent going first. And then just so that we can cycle through names, because sometimes you'll end on a Kagari, as you'll add back on their turn the Engage Engrave, then you'll make Shizuku, and then Kagari add back another Engage. It's really stupid. We play 2 Shizuku. This could even be at 1, but we want enough Link 1 bodies that we can cycle over between the linkage, the Ray comeback, and tag out. Just having a lot of Link 1 bodies is pretty important. And because of that, we play, of course, 1 Hayate, 1 Kaina. Kaina's obviously the most cuttable, but occasionally, because of its effect to make it so your opponent can't attack, one of the cards can't attack, it's actually really valuable. And then Hayate, which we're almost never resolving, but if we need to, say we're going second, then we can always make Hayate battle, dump whatever we need to, and then play on turn 2. So just having it as also not only a link 1, but for that, its actual effect is pretty good. Yeah. And so that's the striker portion. That'll be 10 cards. And then we'll have 4 proxies for Runics. Kill me now. But we've got 2 Hugin, a Munin, and a Jerry. So Hugin's obviously the good one. You discard, add the field spell. It also protects your back row. So sometimes you'll have to banish it. But most of the time, if they try and beat over it, it just goes back to the extra deck. And you still got 2 in the extra deck. Resolving it once is pretty much all you need to do in the game, but because of its other effect, it's just that good. we'll have one of the level 3 guy. That's a time card more than anything else, just like kind of also happens to be. But he gains 1,000 life points on the end phase of the turn he summoned. So he lets you win in time. And then one of the level 4, because occasionally both of your field spells go into the graveyard, and so you need to find a way to get it back. And so that's how you do it. Also, since he's a level 4, he lets you make the final proxy, Dugares. Dugares is actually crazy for this deck because getting the draw 2 and discard 1 is probably as good an effect as this deck can have, even at the cost of the draw phase. Since occasionally you'll have a hand where you need one specific card, or if there was already a Runic engrave, then you'd be okay because you'd have like field spell, or not field spell, 2 Runic spells, one that you can activate this turn and one you can use to summon. But you're in just this really weird spot where you need one more engrave so you can get a draw, and so Dugares would not only get you the search or the draw 2, it gets you a discard, so it's very powerful. Alternatively, it could be something like a Zeus for if you're playing into, say, Kashtira. You go to your main phase, activate any spell, have them use the mandatory effect of a Rise Heart, Talents take, battle phase, swing, and just make a big Zeus, clear board, and then play your game. It also lets you put it back in the extra monster zone. But yeah, that's pretty much all that matters for this deck. I don't currently have a side because I'm really working on perfecting the main deck for this list. It's very, very fun. That's the one thing I can say about this deck more than anything else. There are a few problems with consistency, since occasionally when you Foolish, you don't see the engage, and it makes you very, very sad. But outside of that, if you're able to get past turn 2, you should almost always win. This deck has a bit of a problem with exactly Shifter and Droll, but no one's playing Droll, so we don't have to worry about that. But a lot of people are playing Shifter, so this deck happens to have an unfavorable matchup when that happens. But at the same time, because we play the Miller, if we're able to mill before their turn where they could, say, draw it, that puts us in a better position. A Rise Art would seem like a problem for this deck, but because we have, 9, 10 ways to deal with it, right? Because you've got the Dark Hole in the main, Talents we can use to take, and we can link off with it. We have, 3 Widow Anchor, so that puts us at 5. And then we have 3 Flashing Fire, that's 8, and 3 Freezing Curses, that's 11, so 11 cards to deal with exactly a Rise Heart. It puts us in a very good position, even 13 if you count Engage into Widow Anchor. That puts us in a good position to be able to play that turn. So one of the hardest matchups isn't actually all that bad for this deck. And then finally, it plays a style that is very, very different than pretty much every other deck in the format. So while most decks are trying to play some sort of body control or resolve a really big blowout, we don't care to pretty much all of it. There's not a single blowout card, except for exactly Cosmic Cyclone, that hurts this deck, because evenly matched, you'll just keep the Fountain, because you have like 5 cards in hand and you're still able to play. They try and get rid of your monsters, you don't really care, and occasionally you'll just Slumber to protect it, and then mill 3 more. This deck is actually positioned very well in the format, if it weren't for exactly Shifter, but, you know, just don't get Shiftered and it's okay. Either way, I hope this list can get you guys thinking about a potential Runic build that isn't just, you know, Sprite or spam bodies. Because I actually really, really like this deck, and I'll be getting the rest of the cards very soon so I can start terrorizing my locals with it. Because I'm a problem. Either way, good luck at deck building, boys. I've got some to do myself.